Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant.
I'm just going to tell our people what happened. Y'all don't
Which
usually
time?
hear from me this early in the game, but I'm just going to tell you what happened. The enemy is really not wanting us to do this podcast today because it is such a powerful message that he would give anything for this not to be put into the world. And if you don't know, we do this without really, we don't have a script at all. We have a topic and we just talk. Well, when we came home, I looked down on the floor and my dog, who never does this, he's 11 years old, he had gotten something off of the table, a knitting project that I have been working on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it was the first time I'd really splurged on some yarn that was kind of expensive. And I was about 3/4 of the way through a hat and he tore it up. And I was so mad. I couldn't get my head back into speaking and sitting here talking about marriages. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So we get going and we're 15 minutes into the first podcast and Rusty looks over and it's not recording.
You keep looking. You're paranoid now.
I know, but don't worry. It's looking. It looks like the monitor on a heart monitor. And it wasn't recording. So that was 15 minutes that we had. Rusty was crushing it. I was like, yeah, tell him. So then third, here we go. And we start and we're about 10 minutes in and our dog goes nuts. And he never does that. Ever does that. Every now and again you'll hear him bark, but he was after something. So we had to stop again. So what I want you to hear is this message you're supposed to hear. Because if the enemy is trying this hard to get us to not get this message out, then you know it's a powerful one.
Well,
so buckle up.
I think it's just because so many people out there that listen to us, they feel hopeless.
Yeah.
And
we've been there.
Yeah.
We've felt hopeless before.
If you're listening to this and maybe you're not in a season of your marriage where you feel hopeless, you may not even realize it, but there's people all around you that are hopeless. And I think that you can be a catalyst that helps to give them hope. And so you guys are probably aware the last few weeks we've been going through this kind of a list of words that we think that every marriage goes through at some point. And so we talked about feeling alone. We talked about the incompatibility. And we talked about feeling disappointed. And today we're going to talk about hopelessness. And I think that if everyone can admit it, they've had seasons of hopelessness. And some of you are in that right now. And today, the reason why we really felt really strongly about this word is because at our church this morning, we do once a year a thing called Love First. And it basically puts the attention off of us and onto some type of a need where there's some hopelessness in the world, and our church rallies around some group or some organization that's doing a lot of good things to give hope in the world. So we've done prison ministry before, we've done sex trafficking, we've done orphans, we've done mental health, we've done the compassion where you adopt the children. And this year, it was Convoy of Hope. We're doing some work with some countries in Africa and also in Colombia, and most of it is centered around the poverty, and they don't have food, famine, just a lot of hopelessness and a lot of needs. And so, our church is coming around that ministry. And as the guest speaker was talking today about the ministry, he kept bringing up the hopelessness that those people feel and how what they are doing is giving hope to these people. Well, we have a heart for it as well because we love coming alongside our church and helping in places that we can. But it also stirred inside of us just this season of where we are in our lives, and that our passion is really about marriages and giving hope to marriages. And so people ask us, why do y'all tell your story? Why are you so bold and or public in sharing what's happened is such a painful and it's an awful story in our marriage. But the reason why we feel so strongly is because we believe that our story can give hope to other people and to other marriages. And so we also know that there are so many people that are in our lives, that are in your life. Maybe it's you in particular that are listening, that you just feel like your marriage is hopeless and you're in a spot that you just don't believe that it's going to get any better. And you just feel like it's over.
Yeah.
There's no hope.
And also, I know that there are people out there who they don't feel any hope when it comes to their spouse. Like maybe I'm doing everything that I know to do. I'm giving 100%. I'm reading the books. I'm trying to move forward. But my husband or my spouse is what I was trying to
My
say.
house.
My house and my husband, my spouse. But my spouse is just hopeless. Like there's no way they're ever going to work hard, or there's no way that they're ever going to get on board again. So not just your marriage, but your spouse as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hopelessness in marriage, it just kind of encompasses all of those things. And it might be, your relationship with your spouse. It may be just that your spouse is not on board. There's so much. And I think that hope sometimes gets a bad rap because people can say that you're just holding on to hope, but there's really no hope. And like I said, that's hard to even put into words, but I love what the speaker said today. And this quote, I think, is a great place to kind of jumpstart this. But he said, "Hope does not deny the existence of a problem." And I think that some people look at people in hopeless situations, but maybe those people have hope, and other people might look at them and go, "You're just denying that there's some massive problem." And like I think that people sometimes even look back at our story and feel that way. And they don't even really believe that where we are today is a correct picture of what's actually going
That's
on.
right.
It's that we're denying what happened, and we're just, it's almost like it's our hope is just a make believe kind of a thing. But I love what it says, because he said hope does not deny the existence of a problem. I mean, this is us. It says hope will stand in the middle of the ruins and boldly and audaciously dare to dream, because there is a God who sees us all.
Yep.
So,
Such a powerful statement.
yes. I mean, it's a daring to dream. Hope is, I'm going to dare to dream, but not because there's not something. You're daring to dream because there is something to back it up.
That's right.
And what's there to back it up is that there is a God who sees everything. So whatever your problem is, whatever your marriage crisis, your marriage issues, God sees it all. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what's happening. And so that's why with hope, you can stand right in the middle of all of the ruins and you can dare to dream because there's a God. And I think that if you're just trying to grasp onto something to give you hope and just say, well, I just don't see it. I don't see it for my marriage. I don't see it for my spouse. And that's why we share our story, because sometimes in the midst of hope, you just need something tangible to hold on to and go, oh, okay, I see that it can be done because I see hope in you. I
Right.
see hope in your story,
Right.
and I see hope in your circumstances.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's uncommon in other areas of life either. Like when I was going through breast cancer, I can remember looking for stories
Yeah.
of people who were healed and who, had lived 10, 15, 20 years past and it had never reoccurred.
Mm-hmm.
You're just looking for, okay, they did it. And so there's hope that it can be done, you know? And so I think that it applies, or maybe if you're having trouble wrapping your mind around what it means to have hope, that maybe you can, tie it to something in your life where you've looked for hope and you see that, oh, okay, well, if they can do it, I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the example that we try to be through our story, is that if God can work a miracle in our story, then he can work a miracle in yours. It's nothing we did. I mean, we worked our tails off, but the miracle came from God. And it's because he saw us and he decided to work a miracle in our life.
I think, there could be some people that are just being turned on to our story for whatever reason. Somebody may have shared it with you, and so they may not really know. And the very, very brief Cliff Notes version, so people can see, well, where does this hope come from, is that we had been married for 15 years. A lot of people would have just assumed that we had the fairy tale marriage because we were high school sweethearts. We had made it all the way through college and finally got married right out of college. And 15 years later, we had 2 wonderful children and just thought that life was great. And then Heather one night confessed that she had been unfaithful and admitted to having an affair. And so we started, well, our world crumbled, obviously, at that time. And it was very public.
Just like the ruins that you were
The
talking
ruins.
about.
Yes, exactly. And it was very public. I think that's important because a lot of people kind of wonder, why we so openly share. And we feel like that happened because God had plans for the future, and we didn't know it obviously at the time, but it was very public, and so we just went on this journey of. I mean, look, I'm telling you guys that those first few days, and maybe even longer than that, but certainly early on, it was very hopeless. And, we didn't know if we were going to make it. And just even through those next couple of years of really digging in and trying to heal and learn, there were lots of moments of hopelessness. And just, are we going to be, something would set us back. And it was like, oh, is this going to be the rest of our life?
Mm-hmm.
And is this how we're is our marriage just always going to be this uphill battle, struggling?
Mm-hmm.
And, just like what Heather said, God worked a miracle. And so much of that was because both of us had a willing heart. Now, you also have to understand that in the very middle of the confession, like Heather's heart was nowhere near bent towards let's make the best marriage we've ever had.
Right.
And of course, after hearing what I heard, mine wasn't either.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of our hearts had to align to that over time. And so some of you are going, well, that's our problem. There's not any hope because one of us is not willing. And yes, we completely agree that both hearts have to align and both hearts have to start working towards this. But there's hope even when your spouse is not on board, because you just don't know when God's gonna start that change inside your spouse. And so that's kind of our story, just so people know that's where our hopelessness stemmed from, and how now you can look at the healing that God did, the restoration, and ultimately the redemption of our marriage and where it is today. And you can look at it and go, okay, if they made it, then
Right.
then we can make it. And look, I will also say there are so many pieces. You could go back and listen to our story, but there's so many pieces of the story that just make it deeper and deeper and deeper of a pit that we were in. So,
Mm-hmm.
I just told you guys the very surface
Yeah.
level of what happened,
Yeah.
which is bad enough. But there were layers and layers of it that made it deeper and harder
Right.
to get out of.
Yeah. And there were even certain parts of it, like, okay, I mean, I felt hopeless at the very beginning that you would never forgive me. But then it was like, oh, he forgave me. I mean, even though it's a process, he forgave me. But now I'm hopeless that you'll ever trust me again. So there were different areas along the journey that I would feel hopeless in as we walked through it. Not just the overall picture, but the individual problems as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that he also said this morning that I love, because I think that we share this sometimes, where the quote he said was, "Hope transforms the lives of people who have no other options." And I mean, I believe that can happen sometimes in your life where you just get to a place where you're like, I have no other choice, no other option except I have to have hope, or this is it. And I know that people can get there in their marriage where they just go, I don't know what else to do.
Right.
Like there's nothing, I don't know what else to do. And so now I'm just trying to hold on to some hope. And we say all the time, or we have said before, if you just need to borrow some hope,
Yeah.
and I don't know, you may not be able to wrap your mind around what does that actually mean, borrow some hope. Well, what we're saying is, if you don't even know how to have hope, then look at someone else's hopeful story and borrow from that until you are in a place where you can have hope of your own. And so our story, I believe, is just so important and so valuable so that people can look at it and go, okay, I don't have a lot of hope, but I see what God can do in a marriage that's completely destroyed and broken. And if God can do that for them, then I know that God can do that for me.
That's right.
And you hold on to that hope.
Yeah. My favorite quote that he said today was this. I'm going to find it because we wrote down a lot of them. It's the one, help me. Hope does not deny the existence of a problem. Or did you already say that
I
one?
already said that.
Okay, well then where? Oh, there it is. I found it. Hope is a symbol that a promise made will be a promise kept. And hope works when it is tethered to God. And the reason why I love that is that our hope was never in either one of us. Our hope was not in our marriage being okay. Our hope was in God. And it had to be, our hope has to be tethered to Him. It has to be that cord that is connected to Him so that we say, that's where our hope is. Because He's the one that can save our marriage. He's the one that can restore trust. He is the one that can usher in forgiveness. But it has to be through our relationship with Him. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that may not, or may listen to our podcast, but may not have that relationship with the Lord. And that has to be the anchor, because without Him, there's no hope. Without Him, there's a hopelessness feeling that has nothing to do with your marriage, just a hopelessness in life because we aren't tethered to Him.
Well, I think that there can be this where you're not, when you say that you have hope, that you can get into this place of, well, I don't have anything else to do. I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to have hope.
Yeah.
And just having hope is good. Like, we want you to have hope, but you can't have hope and then just sit back and do nothing.
Right.
Because look, God can work miracles, but ultimately God wants to work this miracle with you and through you. And so, just like what you were saying, there has to be this cord tethered to God. And so, if you're just wondering, well, what do I do? What does that mean? Like, what does it mean to have hope? And then do I just sit back and do I just do nothing? Well, no. What you're doing is you're making your relationship with the Lord everything. You're putting all of the effort into how can I become the godly spouse that I need to be? How can I become the person that God has called me to be? And so that's what you're doing in the meantime. And I was just talking with somebody that I was doing a one-on-one with the other day, and that was the thing that I think that we get stuck in this in the meantime. So you're looking at your spouse and you're like, okay, they're never going to change, but you don't know what to do while you're waiting for them to change. And so it's kind of this, well, what do you do in the meantime? So as you have hope and you're waiting for God to work and you're waiting for God to move, what do you do in the meantime? Mm-hmm. You don't just sit and do nothing. You become the person that you're supposed to be in the meantime and in the waiting. And I love that phrase, in the meantime, because I think that most of our lives we live in the meantime. Mm-hmm. Because we're sort of just waiting for that next thing. Like, where is God going to use me next? What is God going to do with me next? Where am I supposed to be in the next phase of life? And so those things are kind of few and far between. So we live most of our life in the meantime. Mm-hmm. And if you're just sitting and waiting for God to move, mm-hmm. then you're just wasting away the meantime.
Right.
And so even as you're waiting in hopefulness and you're waiting for God to do that miracle, what are you going to do during the meantime?
Yeah. And I have felt that in big events in life. Like, if we just lived from big event to big event, then we're missing all of that in the in between. Mm-hmm. And also that correlates directly to, you can't depend on what God taught you years ago forever. Like, if we were sitting here doing this podcast and I was telling the world that what God taught me and how, because I have a powerful story of how God drew me to himself out of the darkness, out of the pit. It was about a week after confession, and I was with my mentor and two friends, and God knocked me on my butt by showing me exactly who I was without him. Like, it was such a powerful moment for me. Well, and in that moment, I fell in love with him. But if I just fell in love with him 13 years ago and never did anything about that, then then our story right now doesn't mean as much, because you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to grow. You have to continue to draw near to him. You have to continue to become a better wife or husband. You have to continue to work on communication. You can't just, I think so many times we hear in marriage coaching about, well, he's just never going to change, or we'll hear somebody say, that's just not how I'm wired. Mm-hmm. Well, you can change that. Mm-hmm. You can, if you know it's something that is going to help your marriage, then work on it. Mm-hmm. Like, change it. Like, ask God to fix that in you. That's one of the things that I hear a lot, that I just want to go, that's not okay. Like, you can't just say, I'm just, that's not how God made me, or that's not how I'm wired, or I'm just not good at sharing how I feel. Well, fix that, mm-hmm. Like, work hard on that. And so even if you're listening and you're like, I feel helplessness and hopelessness in the fact that my husband will never communicate with me. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't want you to go, oh, well, I don't feel hopeless in my whole marriage. But if you're just listening and you're like, I just feel hopeless in the fact that my husband's never going to open up and share with
Yeah,
me.
so I just give up.
So I just give up. But I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, you can stand in the ruins of communication and boldly proclaim that God can heal that, and God can change that, and God can, if we tether ourselves to Him, can fix our hearts in that area. And so I know that there's not one person listening that can say this doesn't apply to me. Like, I still have areas where I'm like, I know God needs to still work with me there. I mean, obviously, we're all a work in progress until eternity. I mean, none of us are ever going to say, oh, we've arrived. I mean, I still face every day who I am without Him. So I choose Him again and again and again. And so it keeps me from being hopeless on who I am. And so I just think that the word hopelessness is a very, it's a bigger term than I think we can even wrap our minds around, because that's what the enemy wants us to feel, is hopeless. And that is just the opposite of what Jesus teaches us, because what Jesus did on the cross banishes hopelessness. It is what I did on the cross is enough for you, but we just have to lock into that and search that and really dive into that and make sure that that's the lens that we're looking through.
You know, I was thinking about people that listen to this podcast, and some people that listen, they're not hopeless. They listen because they enjoy getting, tips about communication and, the fun things that we share from time to time, just about doing life together and how much fun your marriage can be. And so we get that. Like, we know that every person that listens to this today is not hopeless in their marriage. Some people are in really good, strong, healthy marriages, and they just enjoy. Well, part of the reason why they listen to this is because they enjoy the continual learning, and just being. And so, I have a challenge. I want to end with this challenge to our listeners. And the challenge that I have, I actually thought of this morning when we were sitting in church. And as we were sitting in church, and I was just thinking about the hopelessness of people in Tanzania and people in Colombia. Those were some of the countries that were being talked about. And just how, the children crying during the night because they don't have food and they go to bed hungry. And there's that type of hopelessness, which is very real. Yeah. And he even said, hopelessness knocks on my door just like it knocks on your door, and just like it knocks on the door of the people and those children. And he said, it's just that hopelessness is masked a little differently over in the Western culture. And so I started just thinking about all of the people in that room. Some of them we actually know because they come to us with their problems, because we're the redeemed marriage people, and they know that they can come and they can talk to us, and we will love on them and give them hope. But then I thought, for every one of those, there's so many more that are sitting right there in the seats right next to us. And so I don't know if you got up and you went to church. Well, by the time you're listening to this, it wouldn't be today. But if you went to church, there are people filled in that room. There are people that you go to work with every day that you may not know it, but their marriages are hopeless. There are people that you're out at the sports field with that they are hopeless. Here's what I want to challenge all of our listeners. Look, you may be like, well, I'm not really in a place to provide hope to people whose marriages are hopeless, but you can pass along a resource of hope. And, what I would encourage you to do before you even get out of whatever podcast app that you're listening to, I wish that you would just take just a second right now and pray, who in my life needs to hear some hope? Who needs to hear a story of hope? And then stop whatever you're doing and just hit send. Like, send this send this podcast. And I'm not even promoting our podcast. I'm promoting hope. Like, I want you to think who needs to hear a story of hope today. And I just want you to take a moment, pray about it, whoever that is. I want you to send it to them and just say, hey, I thought you would really get some hope out of this message.
Dang.
Okay. Sorry. Threw it down. But I just think that I want you to know that you can be an agent of hope for
That's
somebody.
right.
And it may not be your story, but it may be that you've heard something that you can pass along to somebody else. So don't be afraid to be that agent of hope to somebody else and love on them. All right. Hey, thanks, guys, for listening. We'll be back next week, maybe with another word that every marriage goes through. And so we'll see you guys next time. Peace.